Night Train here, Florida Night Train. Today is a pretty special day. We have to deal with veterans and PTSD and suicide prevention. Brought a little something here. See this? This is a trigger, guys. It's the last thing my father touched before he left this earth. Yeah, it might sound a little weird for anyone to see this, but that's the last thing he touched, like I said, and sometimes I just look at it and I just squeeze it as if he was still with me. So today, we're gonna talk about suicide prevention, PTSD. We're gonna meet Ms. Dava Guerin, published author who just released a book called The Eagle on My Arm. The Eagle on My Arm is the story of a Vietnam War veteran. His name is Patrick Bradley. His story is absolutely amazing. And basically, Patrick came back here with severe PTSD. And we're gonna learn about how he overcame his PTSD and also some thoughts specifically on suicide and so on. So stay with me. Let's go and meet them. And hopefully you enjoy, you learn something, you're inspired, and you're equipped to prevent. Stay with me.
I decided to pursue a career in law because it gives me an opportunity to help people. When a client chooses us to represent them, they're entrusting us with a huge responsibility. It's our goal to exceed their expectations with our personalized service and to help them to achieve the best possible recovery to compensate them for their injuries.
That's where we come in. We come in and we solve that problem for them and really set them on the right track in order to try and get back to what their life was like before the accident happened.
Well, hey folks, it's Night Train here, Florida Night Train, and I am honored to do a story today and privileged, humble too, with my two guests. And I'm going to read their biography because I just want to give justice to their accomplishment. I can't remember everything. So on my left here, I have co-author Ms. Dava Guerin, right?
Right.
Okay. Dava wrote The Eagle on My Arm, which is a book that we're going to discuss today. She co-wrote this with her late husband, Terry Biven,
right.
Who was an accomplished award-winning journalist. Ms. Guerin is published 6 books, including Rebuilding Sargent Peck, Vets and Pets, Unbreakable Bonds, and now Eagle on My Arm. Eagle on My Arm is a biography of Vietnam War veteran Patrick Bradley and the healing he found in the wilderness and birds of prey. Ms. Guerin is a communication consultant and a freelance writer, right? She previously served as communications director for U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress in Washington, D.C. She is an active supporter of Barbara Bush's Foundation for Family Literacy and, correct me if I'm wrong, the Gary Sinise Foundation. Did I say this right? Sinise?
You're close.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for being here. On my right, none other than Patrick Bradley, enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1967.
Yep.
That's just a couple years ago, right? Yeah. Was later deployed to North Vietnam as a special operator with missions to kill high-value targets. So when I was working on this project, I figured I'm not going to upset him. Combat left Patrick physically and psychologically wounded. Patrick struggled to adjust when he returned home. He seemed destined for military prison after an altercation in which he broke a superior's
officer jaw. His life changed forever when a psychiatrist recommended a unique path for healing. This is where it gets really interesting. A program sponsored by the Canadian government. Patrick traveled to Canada to study bald eagles and documented their behavior. Alone with only a backpack full of supplies, he entered the woods with instructions to count the northern bald eagles and determine if their population was decreasing. How did you count birds in the wilderness?
1,
2, 3.
Patrick's military training prepared him for survival in the harsh Canadian wilderness, and he found himself recovering while living alone with minimal human contact. This sounds so good to me. His work paved the way for groundbreaking research, including the discovery of a link between the use of pesticide and a decrease in southern bald eagle population. Patrick forged a successful career training wild animals for movies and televisions and managing birds of prey, sanctuaries, and theme parks and nature preserves. He also committed himself to helping other wounded warriors by co-founding the Avian Veteran Alliance. This is really interesting. A nonprofit that pairs veterans suffering from PTSD and physical injuries with injured birds of prey. To date, more than 3,000 soldiers have taken part in the program with dramatic results. Successful results, that is. This book is a moving account that reveals how a soldier became a dedicated healer using his years of study in solitude to face his demons and turned his pain into a lifelong passion for helping others. Sir.
Yes, sir.
I want to say thank you for your time here today. Above all, thank you for your service to America and the freedom it stands for. I want to thank you for your sacrifices. Thank you for never giving up. You're a gift. I think you're a gift to this generation and future generations as well. And I mean that because I read this book from cover to cover, and I highly recommend anyone who's a reader or even not a reader to read this book. It takes us through geography, wilderness, humor, beautifully, poetically written at some points. I even had a couple of tears at one point. And I also laughed. So just unbelievable. Dava, how would you summarize An Eagle on My Arm? How would you summarize the book?
Where do we start? It is a beautiful, inspirational story of an amazing patriot, Patrick Bradley, who suffered unbelievably during Vietnam and found a unique way of healing. It takes you through his amazing life, partly is in the Vietnam service, but also in the wilderness, the ability to be alone and survive for 3 years. And during that time, he was able to dispel the demons. He was able to think through all of the things that were bothering him. And that led him to mental health. For him to leave after 3 years, he was a young man, went back to college, went to graduate school, and then had this amazing career training wild animals for movies and television and educating the public about birds of prey and nature and conservation. And it's a beautiful life story. And then most people don't realize, they think that Patrick is paid for all of this work that he's been doing. He's a volunteer. So after he officially retired, at a young age, I might add, Patrick, he decided he wanted to give back. And so every bird of prey program he managed, he was a volunteer. He would go there, 12 hours a day, every day, and try to give back to others. And then just by accident with his son, he discovered that just by taking a walk with a bird on his arm.
A beautiful part of the book.
Wasn't that beautiful?
Yes.
With your son?
Yes.
And discovered this amazing healing, and then decided he's going to talk to a VA hospital, convince them to bring their patients to his park and take a walk with a bird. And the rest is history. So 4,000 people later, 6-7 years later, people had dramatic results, and we're talking
Yes.
dramatic
Yes, absolutely.
dramatic results. So that's it in a nutshell.
How did you meet? Did you think he was a strange bird?
I actually did not. No. Actually, what happened was we were doing a book called Vets and Pets. And our publisher said, listen, because the original idea we had was we were going to do a book about service dogs. And our publisher said, you know what? If you can find other people and other animals, you have a book deal. And he was the publisher from our other book, Unbreakable Bonds. So I was researching it just on Google. I see this man who has birds of prey. He's using wounded birds of prey. That was crazy. I thought that was crazy, but good crazy. So that's how I met him. I called him up. I said, what are you doing? And he told me everything and then invited us down. Terry and I went to visit him. Oh my God, we were hooked. I could actually feel what this was because Patrick let me take a walk with little Lucy, this adorable screech owl, on my arm, but just little, so I could handle it. He let me pet her. I was petting her and she was making noises. And I could actually see it. And then as we got to know him, began writing the book, it was obvious this was an amazing therapy that nobody else was doing in our country. One person in Holland it had a similar program, but with different audiences. And that's why we found Patrick, just by accident. And it was really lucky we did.
Thank you. Looking back, how would you summarize it? You characterize your time up in Canada in the wilderness as mystical. I found that term rather intriguing, and I guess it summarizes a lot of it. Why? What made it mystical?
Well, okay. If you understand, I had a major trauma, mental trauma. Vietnam did nothing good for me. It wasn't mystical the first year. It was a struggle. It was very hard to figure out how I was going to live.
At what point did it pivot into a mystical experience?
I want to say probably the spring of the second year. It was a year into it because I was dropped off in spring. So the following spring, when I had 12, 14-foot snowbanks, 40 degrees below zero. All of a sudden, it's warm and it's beautiful. And the honest truth is, I didn't want anything more than to find water and take a bath. And I found a string. I sat down, put my feet in, and I just started looking around. And it was incredible butterflies and birds. And that's when it hit. This is something special. This is not a live or die situation. This is a special situation. And that's why it was mystical. From that point forward, everything became awe-inspiring as opposed to terrifying.
How did you feel at that point when it sounds like your eyes were opened all of a sudden? How did you feel? Did you feel you were alone? Even though you were alone, did you feel you were truly alone?
No, I was alone. I knew I was alone. I felt alone, but I was happy. Understand, my previous time with people was not happy. It was horrible. And now there's no people. And I'm happy again. I'm enjoying what I'm seeing. Nothing's horrible.
Are you happy right now?
I am. I try very hard to maintain and be very aware of this. You don't get cured from PTSD. Nobody is cured. What you learn is coping devices and techniques. And I'm not such a wonderful giving person. I work with the birds for myself as well. I hold a bird because that's my focal point.
That's good for you.
And it works for me.
Yeah.
If I get upset, if I get stressed or anything like that, I'll go get a bird. Yeah. I'm not saying everybody should, but you have to find a way to cope.
A way to connect with a source of inspiration, exactly. I guess.
Exactly.
Right? Dava, you did a lot of work in your research in this book about PTSD, I think, right? Can you describe for the audience and people that wouldn't be familiar with PTSD, what does PTSD stand for, the causes and the effects and the risks of PTSD?
Well, it's post-traumatic stress disorder. Unfortunately, it affects military members, obviously like Patrick, who've been in horrendous situations that most human beings have not. But it also affects, how many Americans in our country have been through traumatic experiences. It might be a murder of a child. It might be a suicide. It might be a fire. Human beings are all susceptible to it. The difference is how you handle it. If you have treatment, there are so many treatments for PTSD. Unfortunately, a lot of people, especially military members, don't get help. It's a weakness in their minds. If there's any psychological issue, they don't often recognize it themselves. But what was amazing, I think, with Patrick, he knew that. And he intellectually knew that, found a way to heal. And like you said, you don't ever get over it. You're never free from those memories. You just learn to cope with them. And that's why I always say mental health issues are so important. People should always never be afraid of getting help at all.
I have a question here that's not listed here. It's not a trick question, but are you aware of, is there anything that the military does to prepare its servicemen and women to face the possibility of PTSD? Is there anything they do in the training phase to help them prepare for that?
I don't think you can prepare for horror. I mean, you can go to a movie and you're mentally prepared to be shocked by the movie.
Yeah.
But nobody is prepared for the horrors that we see that combat veterans face, or that assaulted people face. These are not part of our life. This is not part of how we grow up.
Yeah.
You know, so nobody's prepared.
It's trauma.
You cannot prepare. And remember, for me, I don't know. I haven't been in the service for a long time, but there was no PTSD when I went into the service, so there was no way to prepare.
Yeah, there was, but it wasn't diagnosed.
Well, yeah,
right.
Yeah, they have. It's been. We've been aware of it since ancient times. The Romans had a definition of problem from war. It's just that it wasn't until recently, relatively recently, that they decided this is a whole problem.
Right.
This is something that we have to deal with now.
Yeah.
They may be trying to prepare you for it, but again, I don't think you can be.
But the treatments are there, which is great. The VA has many, many programs and resources for veterans who have experienced PTSD.
Yeah, your book speaks about that as well. Patrick, this is difficult to ask you, but I must, so forgive me. How was life under the effect of PTSD for you, and how can it be for others? Like, can you help the audience that is not familiar with this to understand and to relate to some degree without causing you too much emotional turmoil right now?
Again, well, my feelings are that, and this is my opinion, that you anybody that's been in a conflict, and everybody that's been in a conflict, suffers from PTSD. It's just some people can handle it a little better than others. For me, it manifests itself in anger. I had rage issues, I had anger issues, and I couldn't understand it. It doesn't make sense. I'm basically a nice guy that goes off in a berserker rage on occasion. And you don't know why. You have no answer. You have nowhere to turn to find, why is this happening to me? Until it happened 93 to me, and I got officially diagnosed. Then all of the past problems started to make a little more sense to me. Because, like I said, you can't get out of it. You can't get over it.
You can't get rid of it.
But what you can do is learn when you're going into what I call a fugue state or PTSD episode. And by the way, understand, just clarify things. A lot of veterans are taking exception to the term PTSD disorder. It's not a disorder. Now they want to call it PTSS, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And that makes a little bit more sense. What happens is you start these flashbacks, you start these memories, and you can't get out of it. You can't just go, oh, no more. You're stuck. And it just keeps going and going and going. And that's when it starts manifesting itself.
Patrick, what happened that triggered the beginning of the healing of your soul up in Canada? I think we touched on it a little bit, but what happened? Like, what triggered the start of the healing, and what was the process that you discovered?
Well, like I said, it was a little trip to the river to wash. And then just concentrating on what's around me, the bushes, trees, the animals, the wind, all of it. And you start to look, if you concentrate on something else and not on what's in your head, then you get out of that trap. And I learned, I started in school as a scientist, and I observed. That's what I do, I observe. And so it was watching nature and the peacefulness, even though I had a textbook once in class and said, the introduction said, everybody emulates Mother Nature and thinks she's so wonderful, but under every rock, under every twig, and under every branch is murder, pillage, and rape. That's true, but as a whole, it's beautiful. And I started appreciating the beauty. Now understand, I've been in the jungle, which is nature too, but that jungle was trying to kill me. Now I'm in a jungle that's not trying to kill me. If I learn to exist, just exist, we're all fine.
Hey guys, Night Train here, Florida Night Train. This is a video to say thank you to the crew at Icicles. Icicles. Yes, you guys did it all. I can't go anywhere without my prescription glasses. You guys crowned the market now with this product in a really nice way. Do you know why? I don't have to go anywhere with my prescription glasses anymore. These babies are prescription, available in prescription. That's awesome, that's miraculous. Not only this, they're progressive and transitional. I can't ask for any more. What's important for me when I buy something? Number one, I want performance. These are made with aircraft billet aluminum grade aluminum. You can't get any better. That's indestructible. Number two, functionality. Guess what? They're available in prescription. I can read. I don't have to bring any of my prescription glasses. They're progressive, transitional, they have ballistic capabilities as well. Number three, style. I mean, look at this. These glasses are slick. So, with all that said, you know what, guys? You pulled it off. You really pulled it off. Thank you so much, Icicles. Oh, I forgot. Guess what? The best part is you make it in America. Thank you, Icicles.
Patrick, one of the most beautiful segment of the book is your first bird, first named Crazy, and then you renamed her Thorn. What an eye-opener. This must have been, not to mention, an inspiration and the hope you must have gained from that experience. I got teary-eyed just reading it. And so, can you briefly tell us about that story?
Sure.
What happened?
I was working at a theme park in Maryland, actually Largo, Maryland, called the Wildlife Preserve. I was the director of reptiles, and we did shows to the public. We would wrestle alligator, handled boas. We called it the pet snake. And then the last part of it, we did the rattlesnake park. And the theme park, it was owned by ABC, had hired a group out of Oregon to come and do bird of prey shows. And we got to know each other, but that was it. I wasn't all that enamored at the time. But a bad situation and that showed me that my life was basically I was on a short road to hell doing the rattlesnake stuff. And I got to talking to the guy that was running the bird of prey program, and I said, I'll teach you how to handle alligators and rattlesnakes if you teach me how to handle birds of prey, because they didn't die when they get bit. And I was pretty sure I was going to.
You had a close call, didn't you?
I had a very, well, actually,
you want
I
to
had
be
a
descriptive about this?
stupid call. It wasn't a close call, it was a stupid call.
That was
I ended up pouring about 9 rattlesnakes worth of venom into a bandage. And I ended up in ICU for 3 days because I'm allergic to horse serum.
don't try this at home.
And therefore they couldn't give me the antivenom. So I had to let it work itself out. So I didn't want to do that anymore. I was done. And the young man, I call him young man, we're both old now, that was running the show, Steve Hottie, said, I'll train you. I said, good, I want that bird. It was a beautiful, well-trained, well-mannered swing talk, I think. And Steve said, nope. And we meet and said, well, we got a bird in from Maryland Fish and Game that's a rehab bird. And for whatever reason, it hated people with a passion, and they called her crazy. And he said, if you're gonna learn, you're gonna learn on a hard bird and learn the right way. And so I started working with this bird, and that's when I changed name. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. And Thorn was one of the doors. So I named that bird after Thorn, not knowing at the time it was a female. Anyway, I would walk with her after hours, and again, I'm getting back to my calming. Stress was very high at the park. In theme parks, when you're doing programs for adults and kids alike, it gets stressful. This was my escape. I started calming down again, and I knew if I ever got upset, I could go get Thorn and go for a walk. And so that was something, really great for me. On the other hand, Thorn had a miserable life. She was found by a farmer, and she was just a little chick. She'd fallen out of her nest. He put her in a 2x2x4 chicken wire cage and left her there for 2 years. They would go and feed her whole food, guts, chicken, things like that. So she just went crazy. She had, nowhere, she couldn't even open her wings. That's why she hated people. And Maryland Wildlife took her from them when they discovered her and gave her to these people because they're wildlife rehab. Anyway, so I was getting into it again. The same thing. I had a focal point that I had in Canada here. And so when I left the park, Steve gave me Thorn and said, she's yours. All you got to do is get a license, a permit. So I did. I applied. I was living in Virginia and working in Maryland, so I applied to the Virginia Fish and Game for a falconry permit. And at the time, it was your name, your address, your phone number, and $5, and you were a falconer. And that gave you the right to have 2 birds and work with them. So I used that permit to keep her, and I kept her for 7 years. A lot of wonderful, wonderful things happened. Just incredible moments. She was my safety valve. I could always grab my bird and go for a walk.
Well, from what I remember in the book, let's call her Thorn, not crazy. She appeared a little bit difficult to deal with at first, to say the least, and quite impossible to handle. So I'd like you to share maybe what happened when you connected, the both of you, that bond, like how did it start, and what did it mean? What did it trigger inside you and your soul and your heart, and then what were the benefits to you? Like, it was an eye opener for you, I'm sure. It must have been an eye opener for Thorin as well. I'm sure she sensed that. So what were the benefits to you, but also what were the benefits to her?
Well, first of all, to me, like I said, it gave me a focal point. It gave me something to pay attention to. Now, understand, when you're working 7 days a week with alligators and rattlesnakes, you don't get to pet them. You know, there's no fun. You know, it's all intense. With Thorin, one of the things you want to do is teach the bird not to panic when they're close to a human, because it's a wild animal. So you want them to learn to be calm and sit or stand on the glove. Gone. So you got hours and hours and hours of just walking. They'll jump, you put them back, they'll jump, you put them back, and like this, until they understand you're not going to hurt them. And when Thorin came back up on her own, turned and flew back up, I realized she started to trust me. And that was my epiphany, if you will, at that point. I had an animal that trusts me, that depended on me for food. She couldn't hunt. She'd never been wild. I hadn't trained her to hunt in falconry since at that time. So I gave her protection. I gave her food. That bond started developing between the two of us. And like I said, it lasted for 7 years. So it was an incredible moment for me. It's that moment when the bird jumps back up and stays there. We used to do a thing. I later went to Oregon to join that same group that gave me Thorin. And we used to have a method called waking a bird, where we get a raw wild bird that we were going to train, and we put the leathers, the furniture on it, put it on our glove in the evening, and just sit with it and just keep doing this. When it starts to get dark, diurnal daytime birds of prey calm down. They don't want to go anywhere. They don't see real well in the dark, and so they stay put. And the idea was to get them so calm on the glove in one long session, sometimes it took 36 hours, that they would stay on the glove, and eventually you would start to notice them nodding off. Now, they don't have to sleep, but when they trust you, they will, when they feel safe. The birds don't ever have to sleep. Nobody understands that. They don't. It's only when they trust a person or when they trust their situation that they will actually drop their head down and put it under a wing or whatever you see in a canary. Canary in a cage, it's safe. This is what we were looking for. And we would sit up with it until it did that. And then we would start our walks and start returning. So that's that moment. It's literally that incredible. And I thought that was the greatest moment when I got Thorin to sit on my glove and just trust me, until Dave showed up at the park. Dave Sidden, who owned Wildlife Images, which is where I went to Oregon to work with, was huge. He was a big man, and he had a big voice. He was an ex-Army Korean vet that was a dog handler. He had affinity animals, and I was flying Thorin at this time from perch to my glove and back. And I had her on a very long leash. It's called a credence. And I'm just in that moment. This is the greatest thing in the whole world. She's flying to me, she's flying back, she's flying to me, flying back. And from behind me, I hear, take the credence off. And I have an expression for what happened to me at that moment that we can't use, but I said no. I didn't turn around. I had my eye on the bird. I didn't know who was behind me. And he said, trigger. And I had no idea. I had no clue
Yeah, you were attached to this bird, not only like physically, but emotionally. It was hard to let go.
And I had no clue what was going to happen.
Yeah,
When I cast her off to the perch, she was free. She could do whatever she wanted. It mattered not. I couldn't do a thing about it.
Yeah.
And she went right to the perch, hit the perch, turned around, and was ready to come back to me. It was like, yes, yes, that's it. That's the moment. That's the exact moment when it all comes together.
Now, there's a lot of videos out there with members of the Senate and the House, nodding like this. Does that mean they feel they're safe?
Humans don't do that.
Okay, let's not talk about this.
Humans are birds do.
Dava, you did, like I said, a tremendous amount of research for this. What would you recommend? What needs to be done from an individual standpoint to manage PTSD long term? What resources are available? Feel free to chip in as well, please.
There are so many, depending on what your trauma is. If you're a military member, right now the military is doing amazing research into PTSD. There are so many resources, and if you're in the military, you will know where to go. The VA website is a great resource. And I think everybody in general who knows that they have a problem, there are free clinics, there are support groups. There's a group called NAMI for people who have all kinds of mental illness and mental illness awareness. So there are tons and tons of resources, but I think the most important thing is that anybody who does have an issue to try to get help. And whether it's talking to a friend, but ideally it's going to professional counseling, is really, really the only way, because trauma is a very specific thing. And anybody who's experienced a trauma, it doesn't matter who you are or what it is, your body is reacting to it. And you're initially in shock. And it's your body's way of just protecting you from experience this horrendous situation. So I would just say for anybody, don't be afraid to get help and talk to friends and family. If you need professional help, medication, go to your doctor. Just be aware that it can be fixed.
Let's start calling it PTSS.
Yes,
right now.
Absolutely.
So that sounds good, but if you suffer from PTSS or any kind of mental illness, sometimes you need a degree of awareness, self-awareness, where you realize something is wrong.
Right.
And so you don't always have that degree of awareness as a sufferer or a victim of PTSS. Right? And so they're not always prone to have that clarity of mind, I guess, and just go, oh, I need help. I'm going to call this number for help. So unless they meet a bird and befriend it, and then something happens and there's an element of marvel that happens before their eyes, then it raises their awareness. But most of the time, people around the victim will notice. So what would you recommend to the people that are around the victim of PTSS that love this person to do it in a way that to reach out maybe on their behalf, if that's even advisable? Because I would suppose if anyone would have reached out on your behalf, you would have had a little bit of a fit of rage, right? So how do you navigate these waters when you care about someone that has PTSS? How do you navigate these waters tactfully so that you can help them to come out of this?
Well,
do you have
that's
suggestions?
That's a very important issue, and especially for people who are caregivers of military members, wounded warriors. Luckily, there are, again, so many resources for people who are caregivers to somebody who has PTSD, who's a military member, and they learn through all these workshops and through the many, many counseling things that are available. But it's really important to understand that in anybody and understand warning signs, risk factors. I think like Patrick said, every military member who's been in combat is going to have some kind of PTSD. Even if you're not injured yourself, you're seeing this stuff all around you. It's very traumatic. Fortunately, the military does do a wonderful job and probably has more resources than anyone to help military members. For the general public, though, I think it's important to understand risk factors and warning signs of any traumatic event that someone has. You might have a car accident, somebody in your family was murdered, died by suicide, but it's our responsibility as someone who is a survivor of that to help that person who may not be able to. Sometimes it's also, especially in men and older men, the toxic masculinity issues which some people have, that they just can't admit there's a problem from how they were brought up in society in general. So I think it's really to every human being to be aware of the things that are out there in order to be of help.
Patrick, how would you recommend that anyone in the surrounding of someone that suffers from PTSS, how they would handle the situation?
That's a tough one. It's an extremely tough one. I obviously work with veterans, and we're reaching out to the general public to get the general citizen. But I came across a situation that I was just absolutely astounded. And it's the first responder.
Yeah.
Policemen. They are put into stressful and traumatic situations on a daily basis. But if they reach out for help, they lose their jobs.
Unless you are
Because it's on record.
Yes and no,
right?
though, Patrick, because a good example is a very good friend of ours, Matt Crucifoli is the sheriff of Worcester County, Maryland, and he's very innovative. And they do all kinds of prevention programs for every officer, completely.
Again, it's opening up.
It is.
But earlier on, when I started,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there was just, you couldn't help it. And they couldn't talk. They literally
Which makes things worse.
forced themselves to keep their mouths shut so they keep their jobs.
Yeah.
The whole public, everybody's got to become aware of it.
Absolutely.
And understand trauma. What is trauma? What happened? Were you you fell off your bicycle when you were a kid? Was that traumatic?
No.
I understand.
The spankings were.
Car accidents, they're traumatic, but they're an acceptable trauma nowadays because they're happening.
Well, almost
all the
being
time.
murdered in your home, like I had, seriously, years ago, very traumatic. But I'll tell you what, I've seen through working with so many, writing stories of at least 40 veterans, no kidding, many of whom had, like Patrick, some losing arms and legs, horrible situations. What makes somebody resilient and able to cope, and somebody else, unfortunately, taking their lives?
Yes.
And a lot of it is support, family support.
Yes.
It's awareness, it's availability of counseling, and to let that person know, first of all, there's always hope. It's okay to have a problem. It's okay to feel insecure, to be scared. And you don't have to be some tough guy and not express your feelings. So I think there's a lot of hope out there. And I think just the younger generation, people are, I see it in the kids too, just more open to talking about their feelings.
Just maybe be more open to
Always.
discuss things a little bit.
And
Yes.
Which is hard for someone who has PTSD.
It is.
You're close to a person that has if you're close to a person you know if they've been through a trauma situation, be open enough and not condemning, but open enough that if that person really wants help, they'll feel comfortable opening up to you. I dealt with a lot of people, and suicide is a major issue with us. But I can honestly tell you, I don't go a week without a thought.
Still?
Yeah. But I have a safety valve. I have a release. Find that safety valve.
Right.
If you're having concerns, let's say simple, husband and wife, couple of kids, husband's a vet, and the wife is, a little concerned, try this. Take the family to a park and go for a walk.
Get out of your environment.
Yeah.
Reconnect with life.
We use raptor therapy. walking with birds of prey in a park situation as a therapy. It's actually called ecotherapy. And ecotherapy is valid, is real, and it's now a study in colleges. So find a park. Very, very few people understand this, but or don't realize it. The country of Scotland, about a year and a half ago, authorized their MDs to prescribe nature as a prescription. Go for a walk.
You should be a little bit more of this here, I think.
Exactly.
That would be great.
Exactly. That's what I'm.
Rather than big pharma, right?
Yeah. That's my argument. When I talk to the vets, I said the number one thing is this is a pharmaceutical-free therapy, because unfortunately, doctors prescribe medicine, and they prescribe it, and they prescribe it, and they prescribe it. At one point I was on close to 20 different drugs. My son was on 40, and he would have to take a drug to counteract the effects of another drug, and take another drug. And I'm down to my blood pressure medication, and that's about it. Because of this little bitty thing we call temper. I still have blood pressure now. But try free. Try it. You'd be amazed.
Get out there, get
Just
some fresh air,
go
and
for a
connect,
walk.
and connect with nature, and connect with the loved ones.
And I give you another really nice example in the book. When we launched the book, the Bushes invited us to their home in Kennebunkport. And President Bush wasn't feeling great. He had vascular Parkinson's. Mrs. Bush as well. They were getting up in years. After we left, it's the nicest. We had a great visit, and it was actually funny. One of the birds had an accident on President Bush's pants, which was very funny, actually. And everybody was like, "Oh my God!" And Mrs. Bush yelled, "Don't worry, he's got plenty of pants." But aside from that, but after we left, one of his closest people told me that it made his entire day. They both loved the experience so much. They were talking about it for days afterward. Well, why? First of all these amazing wounded warriors. Of course, President Bush is a veteran and combat veteran, unbelievable. So to him, this was a monumental thing. But he got to see all these animals. He got to see birds. Mrs. Bush got to hold one of the screech owls. It was wonderful. And so even the experience of just being around, wounded warriors, veterans, and animals and birds of prey just brightened their days. And that's a great feeling.
One of the reasons we're having this conversation today, as you both know, is to promote the availability of healing resources to heal PTSS, right? But there's an elephant in the room. And it's growing at an alarming rate nationwide. That elephant in the room, all three of us have had a little bit of experience with it. Patrick, you lost many men to this, and you've mentioned that you're struggling with some thoughts. I've lost my dad to suicide. Dava, you lost someone dear recently. I personally went through an extreme emotional trauma in 2017 myself. I'm just going to share that with you. The anguish and the pain, the absolute agony was just unbearable. And I was on my knees, and it was at nighttime, so much that I literally lost consciousness. I fell. The pain was too much to take. And I woke up flat on the floor with drool dripping down from my mouth. I started thinking about my dad at that point, right? And his fight against suicide, and how seductive the lie of suicide must have been for him to do that, because he had his own demons. And that's what, and then I started to understand my dad and to have sympathy for him after 30 plus years since he's done that. I've been angry for 30 plus year with him for bailing out, essentially passing on the beauty of seeing my children. I learned the difference between, however, being angry with the victim, okay, and being angry with the demons that are haunting the victims. Today, the three of us, through this discussion, we're literally fighting these demons. And I want to thank you for that. So 22 vets per day, approximately, correct me if I'm wrong, are committing suicide. That's not to mention CDC stats that are showing that in 2016, no one knows, I don't know what the numbers are in 2020, but in 16, there's 45,000 people that died of suicide. The rate went up more than 30% in 99, and now more than half the people that commit suicide don't have any traceable or mental illness history. So that's alarming, and we need to start talking about this openly.
Mm-hmm.
And just there's nothing wrong about opening up and say, I feel like I want to die, you know. I've had those thoughts, you know, and I don't think anyone ever through their life doesn't at one point wonder what it would be like to die when they face emotional trauma. So we need to talk about this. Now, on November 14th, 2020, at Burt's Barracuda Harley-Davidson from 6 a.m.?
Well,
6 a.m.? You're going to get bikers to show up at 6 a.m.?
No.
Until 6 p.m., Patrick and Dava, right, will be guests of honors.
Not at 6 a.m., however. I don't think.
For an event called 22 a Day, right? Patrick,
Yes.
I believe you'll bring some feathered
Bring
beasts.
thunder.
You're going to bring thunder?
Yeah, thunder
Okay.
will be there,
Okay.
and some others.
Good. My understanding is that there's been in excess of 4,000 success stories through your program. Can you tell us actual stories of maybe your son,
Yeah.
Bentalia, and Joe the combat medic?
Well, all right. Let me explain.
Relating to
Yeah, I tried to live a normal life. I really did. I tried to work. I tried to,
what does that look like?
I know.
Because I'm still trying to
I
figure
know.
out. Do you know what that looks like?
Yes, I do actually.
I never
I-
could. I did find out in '93 I was suffering from PTSD, which was like, oh, well, I got a name for it now. It didn't help. There was at the time I couldn't afford treatment or anything like that. But 2010, I kind of volunteered at a park in St. Petersburg to manage the birds. So probably they had 5 birds, but capacity for more. And a young lady joined as a volunteer, a college student, who was in private therapy for PTSD. And let Kaylee tell her story. But I noticed that she had an affinity to animals. So here I've got my son, I'm watching him walking and changing, and I'm watching Kaylee working and interacting with animals. And all of a sudden, it's like, she would be a candidate for an eagle handler. She had that. And so she would come out in the mornings, early in the morning, hold the bald eagle, and then go to classes. And one day I looked out of the office and I saw her in a chair with arms with Abiaka, the bald eagle, with her head on her other arm, sound asleep. The eagle was fine, and she was sound asleep.
Did you get a picture of this?
But because of this time I spent with her, she started opening up to me. And that's when I found out she had PTSD. So I had her book. birds. And, well, it's an adult show. One afternoon, over at Kaylee's house, she lived not too far from the park, Andy. My son, Kaylee, and I were sitting around having some adult beverages, and we got to talking about this effect, what was going on, something was happening. And that's when we started the idea of therapy, of training, of having our birds help people. And when I left Boyd Hill and moved to the Narrows, we took the program with us. It was not official or anything like that, but it was a program. We developed the AVA logo and the intellectual property and everything at the Narrows. That's when we started really working with the veterans hard. I mean, they were coming, we would have therapists bring the veterans to our park 3 days a week.
What is AVA?
AVA is the Avian Veteran Alliance.
What tell us about it?
AVA is just a thought. It's, can we get veterans to come to the park, put a bird on the hand, on the glove, and go for a walk? Because we knew it helped us. Therefore, it might be able to help other veterans. So we formed it. We made it official. It's a thing. And when I was at Largo, at the Narrows,
501
well,
charity art.
so yeah, it is now.
Okay.
When we were at the park, we were sponsored by the Friends of Largo Nature Parks, and they're 501c3. So that's how we got into it. But these veterans would come out, and you could see. I mean, it was not, not hard. They'd come out as a group in a bus, and every one of them would walk into the park on their first time with us with a hangdog. Oh, Jesus, another one of these things we're there with. Because this is therapy. And you know how the group sessions go, and psychiatrists and things. You just get so damn tired of it.
I remember one of the most incredible experiences I've had with raptors, not directly firsthand, but a sight that I've seen. When they court, right? I was driving up in Minnesota, I think, and it must have been about 6 a.m. The sun was rising, and I've seen those 2 raptors out just driving up in the air. I saw these things just flying, and I couldn't tell what it was, and they just locked paws right in front of me, like hundreds of feet up in the air, and I saw them just dropping because they closed their wings, right? They just dropped, and right when I was eye level, they split and they went like this.
Bam, bam.
Yeah. So there truly is a majestic energy by the presence of raptors. It almost brings the heart in a reverent state. You know, I remember that moment. I had like goosebumps, I was seized by the beauty and the backdrop and everything. Dava, can you share, because you've had some experience with some raptors, and can you share your impressions of your first experience with raptors and what it did?
Believe it or not, the first experience with raptors was in Macy's with my mother. And they had a group that brought birds of prey to Macy's, just the same thing to show people conservation and wildlife, and that was amazing. However, when I first met Patrick and we went to the park, my husband, my mother, and myself went there, got to see all the birds, and no kidding, standing next to Sarge was the unbelievable experience, because of course Patrick led us kind of closer than maybe the normal person would be, face to face with this beautiful bald eagle.
How big is this thing?
How big, Patrick?
She weighs 9 pounds and has a
wingspan.
6.5 foot wingspan.
Yeah, so when it's you can't even describe the feeling, knowing that the eagle is our country's bird. that when you see the eagle, you think of patriotism. You just think of everything that makes America wonderful and
Yes.
the wonderful country it is. So to see that in person, and then also to walk with a screech owl on a glove on my arm for an hour or so, and to spend that time, I just fell in love with little Lucy, the screech owl. I even, sent money so she could have her dried mice for a year, her food. But it really is an amazing experience, and I saw that firsthand, the feeling. And Patrick explains it, and we have that description in the book a lot better than I will describe.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a biofeedback principle as well. So if you have PTSD and you're a veteran, you have this bird on your arm, you have to control your emotions. The bird will pick it up. If the bird picks it up, it's going to be in distress. So that person who has those issues needs to take a deep breath to calm down, to know they cannot show any anger, anything for that bird to stay calm. And that's part of the reason why it's so powerful, but it is an amazing experience.
Dava, what's next for you now? Are there any last words you want to share with the audience, perhaps with people you want to thank or whatnot?
Actually, a couple of things. My husband, Terry, co-wrote the book with me. He died by suicide unexpectedly a year ago. Nobody had a clue. One of the things I've been trying to do since then, aside from healing and all of that, is to make people aware of the warning signs and risk factors of suicide. We had no idea at all. We all know about heart disease. If somebody has a pain in their left arm, if they're clutching their chest, we know what to do. If someone is losing their speech, if they are a little dizzy, that could be a stroke. We know nothing, very little about suicide, and it needs to change. And the stigma of suicide needs to go away. It is a mental health issue. And I've learned from my husband's tragedy that maybe we couldn't have prevented it, but had we seen some of the signs, we might have been able to at least offer help. And I want people to know, too, in this book, he wrote the chapters of course, we edited each other, but he primarily wrote the chapters of Patrick in the Wilderness. He was a Pulitzer nominee. He's a brilliant writer. And I read it again, and I hear his words, and the pictures that he was able to show in these stories. It's unbelievable. So I guess my message is a couple of things. Number one, for anybody who's having a mental health issue, please, don't be afraid. It's not a big deal. Terry was a veteran as well. If you're a man especially, and an older man, get help. Talk to somebody. But for people like us, the public, read the warning signs. You can go on to many websites, but the one I love especially is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, who also is a huge advocate. They've done lots of work in Congress to get that law passed, where now there'll be a 988 number. That is a huge thing.
It's their number 800-273-8255, right?
Well, that's the suicide prevention hotline, which is very important. But if people look at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention online, they're an incredible resource. For me personally, I am continuing to write stories about veterans who've overcome. My next book, hopefully, will be something called Kill Shot, about a veteran, Jeffrey Shank, who had an unbelievable story. He was in Iraq, and he was shot. He was in his bunk. He had 3 roommates. One went crazy and shot everybody, killed 2 others, and he survived, but had horrible injuries. He had a bullet through his head. It was just horrible. And they didn't expect him to walk or talk again. Today, he's married with children. He became a chef. So these stories of resilience, I love to tell because the stories of people who have
they
problems,
give hope and they inspire.
They give hope. And I think for everyone out there, there's always hope, and to never give up, no matter what.
So true. So true. Patrick, your plate is full too. What does the future hold for you and Avian Veteran Alliance? How can the audience reach Ava? And last words of your choice to the audience, perhaps people you would like to thank.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all the veterans, with us or not. I want to bring one name out that on our event on the 14th, we are going to hope to raise funds. And we have a nonprofit organization that is going to be the recipient of our funds. And it's a local organization called Out of the Darkness. Illness, which is an arm of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Okay.
And they hold walks all over. I had walked with them in Tampa, and I had SARS, as a matter of fact, when they're there. But they're an incredible organization. And they have hotlines, and they have people you can talk to. But they will be at the event, so that will give it.
Okay.
And they work with the entire public. As far as what I'm doing,
They do work with the entire public.
Yes.
So there's like AVA, the Avian Veteran Alliance and all that. This is available to the civilian as well, or
Yes.
just veterans?
we're expanding.
Okay.
Okay. That being said, we have nothing, but we're expanding. We have to rebuild our whole organization because the places I was at, the parks, that was their property. The birds were literally owned by them. So we're starting over again, rebuilding from the ground up. We got an incredible nucleus, a board of directors, if you will. Fran's one of them, by the way. And what we're looking to do, David brought it up, is the mobile program. In other words, we'll have a location for the birds where we can train them and work with them and get them right. And then we always train them in what we call travel boxes. So each bird gets its own travel box. We'll load them up and drive them to parks and meet veterans there and let the veterans walk in the parks. It's the walking in the park that's half the privilege. The birds half, the nature is half. And I can't afford to buy 80 acres or 100 acres or 200 acres of land in Florida. Nobody can. But we'll be able to take the birds there, let the veterans walk with them, and then take them back. So we get away from a lot of issues that I've been dealing with. Cities, liability issues are just incredible. We'll carry our own liability insurance, so the parks don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
It'll be our birds. Parks don't have to worry about that. We'll feed them and everything. But the parks will get the publicity. And in a very realistic world, good pub is worth its weight in gold. This is good publicity. Everything we're doing, we've been written in papers in New York, papers in DC, Florida. We've been, so it's good. Let's face it, right now it's a good thing to help veterans.
Indeed. Anyone else you want to thank?
My co-founder and my son, my co-founder Katie Hoyt, my son Steve, T. Rhea. I mean, there's so many people. I couldn't possibly name them all
For sure.
because I'm old and I forget.
Thank you. Personally, I want to thank, I think we all want to thank Fran Ash, as well as Rhett, her husband, and the entire staff at Law Fran. I always like to say that Law Fran and her husband and staff there, they put the human soul back into the practice of law. Literally. I want to thank Bert at Bert's Barracuda for always being there, opening the doors to everyone. I want to thank Icicles as well as Bell Helmets. I want to thank Andrew from Morimoto. And I also want to thank Tony of Full Throttle Magazine, and also Hard Money Jen, who will get you any kind of mortgage you want, even if you have no credit at all, apparently. So she has a whip and she whips them into shape. So with that said, there is a gift from Fran for you, from Fran and Rhett, and I'd like to present that
She's
to you.
incredible.
If that's okay.
I love
It's
her to death.
just a couple $1 million.
I'll take it.
So it's been, we brought it here and it got a little bit dirty. And so the dogs started to lick it and it kind of ruined it, but you get the message.
Yeah, I do. That's beautiful.
And you'll have Tinky's signature on it as well.
Yeah, there's Tinky's signature
The
right
little lip mark right
You
there.
want an interesting little sidebar?
there. Sure.
Mhm.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Would you like to guess what my middle name is?
Forrest? Are you serious?
Did she
Wow.
have that?
I don't know. I don't think so. I wrote these mines with 2 R's.
That's
But,
amazing.
And so is my hands.
There you go. That's pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's wonderful.
To finish here, I'd like to read a poem. Everything I do, when I write stuff, I like to quote from other books, other authors, and things that are meaningful. And this is a poem that my dad gave me when I was maybe 10 years old. And it's widely known, but I'll just read it because there's so much wisdom into it. And it's so meaningful. It always spoke to me. It always carried me through life. And the poem is called If. Have you ever heard it? Yes. By Rudyard Kipling, right? You'll be a man, my son. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves and to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if either foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
That's beautiful.
So I want to thank my dad for showing me this poem, for showing me how to go motorcycling, horseback riding, bicycling. You had a good heart, Dad. Thank you all, the servicemen and women, definitely for massive sacrifices so that we can enjoy the freedom. Hopefully, there'll be more appreciating it. And our quality of life. If you or anyone you know is suffering from PTSS or PTSD, tempted by the thought or seduced by the thought of suicide, depressions, or trauma or whatnot, there is help. Please, there is nothing wrong. There is no shame. It takes a lot more courage to look at ourselves and realize what our reality is, that we need help, than to just give in. Please hang on. If you don't, you will leave so much more hurt and pain behind you for those who love you. Don't do that. Fight the good fight. If you need help, 800-273-8255. Thank you all. We'll be back. Full Throttle Magazine, Night Train, Florida Night Train. Patrick, thank you so very much. I enjoyed this book so much. You learn about geography, wilderness, beasts, eating squirrels that are boiled rather than cooked, fighting with wildlife, eating insects. And there's poetry in there. It touches the heart, it touches the soul, it challenges, it inspires, and it encourages, and it leaves you with the thought that there is hope and there is help available. Thank you so much, Dava. I look forward to your next book.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hospitality and everything. Thank you so much.